Hi everyone. All right, in this video we'll be going through group validation, which is a sequel to the nested validation, and that is a sequel to the jacket validation. So everything basically is like a CV, so you're basically covering that handles everything around your validation. So in this video we'll be looking in depth into group validation. Please note we'll be doing a little bit of coding, right? But however, the good thing is we'll be covering every single part. And also one part I mentioned in the last video, also formatting the errors and displaying it properly, we're going to be doing that also in this video. With that being said, let's get into it right away. All right, I have this project, everything Spring Boot, which we've been working on. So what we're going to do is to actually open up our packages, and then we're just going to dive right in. So for this, I'm going to create a new DTO to be able to show the group validation, because I'll be creating it as another endpoint in the sample controller. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create something called a payment request. So just hang in there because it's going to be a bit of a long video, right? So the next thing, I'm going to place it at data. One thing to note, if I'm speaking too fast, you could always reduce the tempo. So you could always reduce the tempo since you're watching, reduce it, and you could actually slow down the speed so that you could actually go at your own pace. And if I'm slow, even with this way I'm speaking, you could always probably hasten it up to get to the important details. All right, so I'm going to place in payment request. You may ask, why am I using class? Because I'll be placing some other things in here, and if you're placing it in record, it might not be properly formatted, but you could achieve the same using record and whatever you. All right, so what I'm going to do is writing some field. All right, so I have big decimal amount. Okay, I want that. I also want string merchant's name. Okay, that basically works. Okay, I was thinking I was using record. There has to be a private here, and I also want a private here. All right, then next up I want string reference. Apparently when you're basically paying for something, you need a reference, right? So I'm placing a reference, right? And the next thing I'm going to add is currency. So I'm going to have a private string currency. All right, so that being said, now what I'll do to make this more fun is that I'm going to also couple in nested validation in here. So let's go ahead and create something called contacts. Private contact. So that should be the customer contact, or who's paying the contacts. All right, so since I've created contacts with private, all right, since I've created contact, I need to create it so that'll be a public static class, then contact. Okay, all right, so that resolves that bit. And for contact, I'm just going to have some extra details by saying, let's just give it two things. Say string private string address. Okay, and I have private string phone number. All right, so that basically works and gets things actually fine. All right, so that's what we intend to achieve. Now after this, let's just go in once again and add in something a little bit different, right? So what I'm going to do is just going to place in private string payee name. Now this payee name would be for our group validation. So that is why you see I'm trying to separate things. I'm trying to separate it, right, so that they have some spaces. Now I have private string requester name. Then I also have private, let's say local date, due date. Then finally, let's place in say private int payee age. All right, so I think I want to have it this way. Let's just make a question name different, and let's make this here. Okay, I think that should be better. All right, so now we have these details basically there. So what are we going to do? So what we're going to do is quite simple. So now let's start placing the details in. Okay, I also need my data here, right? So to be able to make this, to bring in the getter and the setter. Now let's start placing in the annotations. Okay, a decimal mean for the amount, and the amount here, I'll just say the value I want should be probably 100, right? 100. And I'll place in the message. I'll just say amount is acquired. Is acquired. All right, so that's pretty much cool. Next up, let's just put as not blank. Where for string, I like using not blank, and I've told you the reason why. The last video, it basically covers white space character, not empty and not null. So I'm gonna say merchant name is acquired. All right, so let's place this as all right, so I'm just gonna copy this because I have a lot of string here. I'll just place this here. This should be reference. Here for currency, I'll do same. I'll say currency. Then for payee name, I'll come in here and say payee name. Then for local date, I'm going to make it a bit different. And for local date, what I would do is I'll say at future. So there is at future. And future will basically say the date should be in the future, not now. So I'll just say future. I'll just say due date. Due date should be in the future. All right, pretty cool. Remember, this is a nested object, and as a result, I need at valid. Remember, if you watched the previous video, if you didn't watch the previous video, please kindly check to see what this means, right? I explained it in great detail, but the idea is that for nested object, you must place it at valid for you to be able to scan index. All right, so now since we place it here, let's quickly fill this out. So I'll say for this, both strings, I'll just place a string here, and I'll just say address is acquired, and for this I'll say phone number is acquired. All right, so for this one also, I need a not blank. I'll just say the question name. The question name is acquired. All right, now this is where it gets interesting. So I'd like you guys to pay pretty cool attention here. Now, for group validation, there has to be a way for us to separate, okay, what instruction is for who. Now, what is the use case? The use case is, take for instance, you are a payment processor and you are connected to Visa, you are connected to MasterCard, you are connected to Verve. Verve is a card in Nigeria, right? You have those 3 cards. And you have some merchant that is connecting to you, and they have customers, right? Those merchants have customers that can either be using Verve or MasterCard or Visa or any of them, right? So based on the payload they are passing, we need to be able to segment or separate which one they are actually using. Take for instance, payee name may be required by MasterCard but not required by Visa. Due date may be required by Verve but not required by Visa. Do you get the idea? So that is how it basically works. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create some interface. That interface is how we do the segregation. So let's jump right in. The moment I've actually written that, I'll do some little bit of explanation so we can understand also. So what I'll do, I'll say public interface, right? This interface. Now for this interface, I'm just going to say Verve. All right. Then I'll say public interface, and I'll say MasterCard, right? And I'll go in here and say, all right, let's just follow the convention because I'm starting to place in capital letter. Just place the convention. So Verve. So I'm writing Java, so it'll be Verve, right? Okay, cool. So here will be MasterCard. All right. Then finally, I'm going to place in Visa. Now, what you would have noticed within this is, if you check the annotations, if you actually check, remember I mentioned when you have an annotation, you could always press Ctrl P, the annotation, the method, you press Ctrl P or Command P to show you the other details it actually takes in. So if you press this, we'll see it takes in the concept of groups. The concept of groups basically is telling you what you want to apply it to. So what I will do, I will actually bring this together. I will say for this, for payee name, I want it to apply to which group? I want it to apply to Verve dot class, and I want it to apply to MasterCard dot class. Do you see how it works? So I'm saying for these, I'm saying payee name is required by Verve, is required by MasterCard, and I'm going to do so for this. Now, for this guy, for requester name, I'm going to say requester name is only needed, right, by Visa. So I'll say this is only needed by Visa. Visa.class, right? Then for this, which is payee age should be, let's say, a minimum. Let's just put a minimum basically, and a minimum just takes in a value. You have to paste in a value, and the value should probably be, let's say, 18, right? It must be minimum age required by this is 18. I'll say payee age, and I'll make this required by, so we've covered MasterCard, Verve, Visa. I'll say this is only required by MasterCard, right? Somebody might be confused, so I'm just quickly going to do a quick recap on this. Now, the idea behind this is this, right? You see, all these validations will be applied automatically. This will be applied automatically, but you see these three will not be validated, or will not be it will be validated on the controller bit. You will be the one to tell it when it should be validated. Now, in our own scenario, what we are saying is, if I see the payee name and the local date, it must definitely be a Verve or MasterCard. Does it make sense? Now, if I'm seeing a requester name, I am saying it must be for Visa. And if I'm seeing a payee age, it must be for MasterCard. So what happens is, the moment you are just passing a detail, I'm just going to go in and just check. So another thing I can do to then make this, I could probably pass in an enum here. I'll pass in an enum, right? So the enum will tell me which particular card it is actually referring to. So this is to design. Some will just rely on this alone. So when they rely on this alone, they'll be able to tell, okay, I want this to be for Visa and MasterCard, and I want this to be for Visa, and I want this to be for MasterCard. All right. So what I would do, others could say, no, I want you to tell me particularly, I want you to give me the enum itself. Give me the enum. Tell me which card you're trying to validate, and I'll use that enum to validate this bit. All right. So that's another bit. So what I will do, I'll just say private. So let's just go to the top. I think it's better here. I'll say private enum, right? So let's just go in here. So the enum, so I need to create the enum rather. So I'll say enum. So this enum, I'll just say card type. Let's say card type, and this would take in three values: Visa, MasterCard, and Verve. Now, the beautiful thing with this is you must pass this in, right? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to default it, because I could have written some validation on this. We could actually have some custom validation on this card type. Probably we should look at that in the next video. We would actually validate this, right? For now, I'm just going to hard code it to say the value, default value is Verve. So if you don't pass it in, I will assume is Verve. That's what it means. That's what I'm saying here. Because we have to add, it's going to take some extra time, and I want it to be within a constraint or a particular time frame. All right, so we basically have this now. So being able to tell that, hey, we want these to be validated for all requests. But once it comes to the card type, if it is Verve, I only want it to be here. Okay, so I think what we'll do is let's remove this guy. Let's remove this guy for simplicity's sake, because I'll need to do some extra logic which I'm trying to prevent. Okay, so I'll say for if it's Verve, these two are needed. If it is Visa, this is needed. And if it is MasterCard, this is needed. I hope that is clear, guys. So that is how you use interface to basically segment. Please note, like I mentioned, this is not automatically validated. This will not be automatically validated. We have to do some bit of logic to get this to work. All right. You already are familiar with this. You already are familiar with valid. I've just introduced another concept, which is the interface that helps us with group validation. This is the nested validation, which we touched on in the last video. This is the normal Jakarta validation, which we touched on in 2 videos ago. All right, with that being said, let's go into the next phase. So what we are going to do, we're not going to end this video we're not going to end everything in one single video. So I'm going to post 2 videos, this and another one. But for now, I'll just try to get to the 20-minute mark. Then we'll continue in the next video to be able to wrap this up. So what we are going to do, we've been able to bring this in. So how do we validate it? Is now the next question, right? So the way to validate this, let's go in to our controller. So I'll go into my controller, my sample controller, which I've been using, and I'm just going to go in here and just say I'm going to add another request. Let me just copy. The evils of copy and paste. Please do not paste. Right? Do not do this. All right. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to say pay. It's a pay request, and this will take payment request, and this will take payment request. All right. So that is basically done. All right. The next thing I'm going to say, because this will conflict if we don't add in a path here, so I'm going to say path. And I'll say pay. I use path so that I don't need to add a forward slash. So that I've been able to do. So for this name, let me just use merchant name here, right? And for the sample age, remember, we don't really care about the response. We just want to be sure that validations are working. So let me just place in 52 here. So I've been able to actually make this standardized. So we are going to work with this. All right. Now, the next thing is, if we test this as it is, right? If we test it as it is, it's basically only going to validate this part, the nested part, but it will not touch our group validation. Let's test it out to see if it's true or not. All right, so I'm going to bring in our Scratch, my famous Scratch. Remember, I use this so that I don't have to do this for any other one. So I don't have to basically bring up Postman, I mean to say. So see, this is me bringing up my Scratch. All right. So for my contact is also necessary. So I'm going to bring this and put it to the right hand side. So amount, yes, I'm going to say, I'm just going to make this valid because that's what the goal here. Merchant name, I'll just say Z, right? And reference, I'll just say ref 01. And currency, I'll say NGN. And contact, remember contact is a nested object. So I'm going to come here, I need address, which should be the address, and I'll just say number 432 Industrial Way. All right, then next up, I'll place in my phone number, and my phone number will just be plus 234 80 1234 1234. That should be a total of 10 if I count from here. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. All right, so basically that's it. Now for card type, remember, if I don't set anything as card type, it basically defaults to Verve, right? So I'll just go in here and remove this, and let's validate. Remember, not blank does not accept empty, as it is, but this is going to work because because this is not going to be validated, like I mentioned, based off these groups are basically added to it. So what I would do, let's just go in and start the application. All right, let's just go in and check this out. All right, let's see, something has gone wrong. Okay, yeah, so this part 80. All right, let's run this, and as you can see, this works because it is not taking cognizance of these guys, right? Even the card type is not basically added because for the card type is defaulting to this. And how can we tell? Let's debug it. So if I debug this and I bring this here, right, let's place our breakpoint here and let's run our Scratch. As you can see, so let's check the request. You see, it defaults. If you check this out, it defaults to Verve, and everything basically works as it should. Is the nested part working? Yes, it is. Let's remove this address. And run it again. Boom, we get an error which says address is required. You can see that. So our nested validation is working. And let's come in here. Let's remove currency and let's run it. Boom. You see, this basically fails. Currency is required. So we can see that our normal validation and the nested validation is working accurately. Now, remember I mentioned I'll be posting 2 videos, right? I'll place the link together. So what is going to happen is we're going to go into the next video and start looking at how to validate this. This comes with some extra classes that are going to write and the formatting of our exceptions. With that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video.